Rev up your engines!
It's yours, so Scotty. Have you ever had a client who wasn't satisfied with a Toyota vehicle? Yeah, I had a guy once. He bought a Toyota van, and then he complained that at about 80,000 miles, it started burning a bunch of oil. He brought it over and checked it out. I said, it's not just burning oil. I said, it's leaking oil. I said, what have you done to this thing? I said, how often have you been changing the oil? And he said, well, I've never changed the oil. He had 80,000 miles. He never changed the oil. I'm not making this up. Now, on the other hand, he was a regional shoe sale management for this big shoe company. So he went all over the southwest of the United States. And this dude was putting like 8,000 miles a week on his vehicle. So he did it in less than a year. But still, you need to change the oil, you know. He could have pushed it because that's 10% city driving. So his, say, 18,000 miles on a highway would be equivalent to like 1,800 miles of stop and go traffic. But you still got to change it sometime. And he just didn't. Then it used oil like mad when he got to 80,000 miles. Strangest thing was he drove it to 100,000 miles and he cheated these poor guys that paid him 10 grand cash, because that was back in the day when the Speedos went to 99,990 and went back to zero. And so when he sold it, it was only a year or something old, and it said it had like 2,500 miles on it. I'm sure those people were furious when they figured out what happened. Texas native says, hello, Scotty, watching from Houston. Getting a 2016 4Runner with the all-time four-wheel drive. What are your thoughts on their system in a 4Runner? Well, I've never seen one break, so that must say something, you know. 4Runners are 4Runners. They're full frame. They're all still made in Japan, where they make the best cars, and that was a really well-designed four-wheel system. They really work well. If you don't mind the slightly lower gas mileage, personally, I'd buy a 4Runner with just rear-wheel drive. I don't go up in the mud and stuff, and I don't care. I'm not pulling a bunch of stuff. I really don't care one way or the other. But if you want the four-wheel, that's one of the best systems to go, because I personally never seen one ever break. You're going to overpay because of the corona pandemic nonsense, but if that's what you want, it's a good pick. Tim P says, Scotty, my 2010 RAV4, 206,000 kilometers, has cool AC, not cold. Does it need a top-up? I'm sure it does. I did my son's when we went to Rhode Island. He's got a Corolla, and he said it's not working right. And I didn't bring my AC tools with me. There was an O'Reilly Auto Parts store a mile away, and I got one of those cans that has a built-in gauge, right? And I put it on. I could see the pressure was low, and they're cool. You just push the button and it adds. You watch the pressure. When the pressure went up to about 35 psi, it was freezing cold inside, and then he was all happy. Plus, it still had half of that can left. So I said, if it gets low in another 3 or 4 years, now you know how to do it yourself. So all cars leak refrigerant over time. They have to, because the compressors spin on a belt. So there's a shaft that goes in a compressor. The shaft has to have a seal to seal the compressor, to seal all the gas inside. It's a rubber seal. If that was a perfect seal, it would run dry, spin it on a shaft, it would burn out, and it would all leak out. So it's made to leak a little bit, so a little bit of refrigerant and AC oil lubricates it. So over time, they all leak somewhat. Toyotas, they might go 10 years without needing a top-up. Hondas, generally, they'll go 4 or 5 and then they need a top-up. But they all eventually need some kind of top-up. Romy says, can I use synthetic blend in a 2015 Toyota Highlander with 40,000 miles? Yeah, you can use synthetic blend oil on it. You can use regular oil. You can use full synthetic oil. You can use whatever you want. Synthetic blend has some synthetic, some regular. Realize it's synthetic oil. There's all kinds of different ones out there. The law is that it's natural oil that's been somehow treated, sometimes with acid, sometimes with steam, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of different grades out there, and they all work perfectly fine, you know, as long as you get a name brand. I mean, I wouldn't get, you know, Mode X you never heard of before, buy it from a regular company's name. As long as they got that shield in the United States with the certification on it, they're perfectly fine. James Self says, Scotty, when do you change shocks on a vehicle? Easy question. When they're worn out. Okay, you want to know how they're worn out. If it bounces too much, simple, easy check is parked in your driveway with the emergency brake on. Push on it, or get a couple of guys. And if you push on it, you let go and it bouncy, bouncy, bounce, they're worn out. Do the same in the front. That's a good static test. The best dynamic test is take it on a highway. If it goes straight, perfectly straight, but then you hit a bump and it starts bouncing around, they're worn out. That's one of the best ways. Or if you corner and it starts swaying around, they're worn out. And if you get a flashlight, nice bright one like this, look inside the struts. You see the springs. If you see oil, it means they're starting to go out. They're full of oil. And if the oil's leaking out, they're starting to wear, and better to change them sooner than later. Just don't ask a crooked mechanic to check, because a lot of times they'll have a can of spray oil. They'll spray it. Well, look, it's leaking oil. You need new ones. So check it yourself. Ron says, Scotty, what do you think of the 2021 Toyota Hilux with the 2.4 diesel engine? Should I consider it? Okay. Those are excellent trucks, and they're also excellent engines. Now, you're talking about a brand new truck, right? Buy a Toyota brand new truck. It's going to last you an awful lot of time. If you don't mind the price, you want something that's going to last, go ahead and buy that truck. I don't sell them in the United States, but I got friends in Australia with them. They drive the heck out of those things. I got a guy, he's got 500,000 miles on this, so they're excellent trucks if you don't mind the price. Or Zua says, do you recommend O'Reilly rotors or Toyota OEM for my Toyota? The discount rotors are perfectly fine. If you're not a hard driver, you don't push it. But of course, the OEM ones are much better. They're made in Japan. They're better steel. I'll give you a perfect example. I had original ones on my Toyota Matrix, right? They had 70,000 miles. A company sent me aftermarket ones that were made in China. They went about 15,000 miles and they warped and they started shaking when I hit the brakes at 65. So, I gotta say, the OEM ones are a lot better. If you're in a pinch, you can buy the cheaper ones, but if you keep your cars like me for hundreds of thousands of miles, you're better off with the OEM, because I've seen some OEM ones. 94 Celica had OEM ones up to like 235,000 miles on them. They haven't warped. They were better made ones. They weren't made in China. They were made in Canada, and they were pretty good. They still work good. But they weren't warped, they were a little rusty, but they didn't shake when I hit the brakes at 60, so. GT says, Scotty, how do I know when it's time to replace the clutch on my car? If you can't get it into gear, when you're starting up, it grinds, that usually means the clutch is worn, unless your clutch pedal is soft. If it's soft, it means that your clutch master cylinder, your clutch slave cylinder is leaking, and replace that. And that doesn't cost that much money on most cars. The biggest thing is clutch slippage. So, what you want to do is, going 30 miles an hour, let's say, put it in fourth gear and floor it. If you see your RPMs go real fast, but it doesn't accelerate very well, that means the clutch is slipping, the plates are wearing, they're getting thin, and it's time to replace it. And take my advice. If you're going to change the clutch in your car, don't say, well, I'll buy this part, that part. Buy the entire clutch kit. You can get aftermarket clutch kits that are great for $100-something bucks with all the parts. It costs a ton of money, and if you do it yourself, it's an awful lot of work pulling off the transmission. You're going to go through that much work, replace all the parts. Then you don't have to think about it for years. Don't, like some guys say, well, the throwout bearing was bad, so I changed it. And then 6 months later, it starts slipping. No, you take it all apart, replace all the parts. B-Baxter says, how often should you clean the MAF or MAF sensor? The MAF sensor, they get dirty from air, but they're after the filter. Maybe once every 3 or 4 years. It's not that big of a deal, as long as you keep a clean filter. Now, a MAP sensor is manifold absolute pressure sensor. That measures vacuum pressure. They really don't need anything. All they're doing is sucking air. There's nothing to them. Now, some of them, like in American cars, are in a poor position and they'll melt. Look at them. If they're melting, you need to replace them. And they have vacuum lines. Check the vacuum lines to make they're not loose. They don't fall off. They don't have cracks in them. Vacuum lines cost nothing at an auto parts store. Replace one there, but they really don't need cleaning. It's Charles says, Scotty, what do you drive? We got a 2007 Matrix. We got a 2001 Lexus ES 300, that's a great car. I got my 94 Toyota Celica. I got a Triumph Thruxton motorcycle and a Suzuki Katana, but it's got a Gixxer 750 engine and it's screaming fast. Those are my vehicles that we drive around. Of course, since there's two of us and there's all those vehicles, a lot of them sit an awful long period of time. Hilarious enough, my brother-in-law stopped by from Texas and he says, hey, look, why did you buy a new car? You had those cars for years. He doesn't fix cars, so he buys new cars when they get 100-something thousand miles on it. And I mean, he's not dumb. They've always had Toyotas. They got a Honda CR-V now, and that's a great vehicle. I mean, he's smart. He buys the right vehicles. He just gets rid of them too soon. He can keep them a lot longer than what he does. Answer P1 says, my Z06 is too fast, Scotty. How do I make it slower? Just disconnect some of the spark plug wires of the coils. I did that once when I was in Ivesdale, Illinois, when I was going to the University of Illinois. My friend had a 900 Kawasaki, which at the time was the fastest production motorcycle in the world. And people were all drinking and fooling around at a bar playing pool. And then he gave me his motorcycle keys, but it was a 4-cylinder motorcycle. And he unplugged 2 of the spark plug wires so it wouldn't go too fast. It probably was a good idea. I made it back to his house with no problems because I couldn't make it go 180 miles an hour anymore. You might try that if you want to make it slower. Mainly control your foot with your brain. That's the best way to make it slower. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.